We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, now in Albuquerque, New Mexico at 1000 KKIM, and on the Internet in the Richmond, Oakland, and San Francisco Bay Area. Our voice, it's going to be a long morning, I can tell. Our guest by phone, John Cox, businessman, and a gentleman who has a very, very interesting initiative that he's trying to push that I think is going to push a lot of people's buttons here. And that's on a new ballot proposal. John, talk about that new proposal.
Well, as we discussed earlier, the thing that most Californians know is that their legislature is in the pocket of big money, and their vote doesn't matter. And it's because the districts in California are just so humongous. 1 million people in a state Senate district, that's like running for governor of North and South Dakota at the same time. So the answer, I think, lies in reducing the size of campaigns so that money isn't the overriding factor in how people get elected. So what we've come up with is an idea which I've based on New Hampshire, a tiny state admittedly, but it's a state that has very, very tiny little legislative districts where campaigns are not about how much TV or radio or mailers you send out, but campaigns are door-to-door and person-to-person. So how do you do that in a state with 40 million people? We came up with an idea called the neighborhood legislature, and it's a very simple concept. We break up these huge legislative districts into 100 tiny little mini districts within the big district. Each of those 100 mini districts elects a neighborhood senator or a neighborhood assemblyman in very, very tiny campaigns where the campaigns are door-to-door. The 100 people who are all legislators, they all get a vote on all legislation, but they don't go to Sacramento. They get together once every 2 years, and they elect a member of a working committee who goes to Sacramento. So in essence, the 100 people delegate their lawmaking authority to a committee, and they elect one member of that committee. So each big district sends one person to Sacramento just like today. But that person is accountable to the 99 in that district who are then, in turn, accountable to their own little tiny districts. And in those little tiny districts, there may be only a few thousand voters, so that each vote counts. And each person in that little tiny district will know who the representative is and be able to have an impact on that representative. This takes money completely out of the equation. People will end up going to Sacramento, but they'll do it by first winning their own little tiny district, and then they need to convince a majority of the other 99 who are elected from the neighborhood districts within that big district themselves.
You know, John, I like the concept, but let me tell you one problem I see you having.
Sure.
Shannon Grove, who's our assemblywoman, came up with a great part-time legislature initiative that was on the ballot last time out, and Mike Reagan, who's a friend of the show's, was the big sponsor of it. And we had Mike on not too long ago, and he said the problem is the politicians in California have basically told corporations, if you sponsor this thing or support this thing in any way, you can kiss off any help from us. So they're having to get support from out of the state, out of California, to be able to back that initiative. Are you going to have the same kind of problem where you're not going to be able to raise the money because politicians are going to fight this tooth and nail?
Two issues. First of all, the part-time legislature, I know Shannon, she's a lovely lady, and her heart's in the right place. But a part-time legislature doesn't do the job. And why? Because as long as you have these big districts where you need big money to run big campaigns, money's going to be the overriding factor. So whether they're part-time or full-time is not as much the issue as how much money you need to run a campaign. And not only how much money you need to run the campaign, how much you have to fear some wealthy group or some big business out there that will run independent expenditures against you in one of these big campaigns. So you got to get to the real nub of the problem, and that is the impact of mass media campaigns. That's what the neighborhood legislature does. Now, to the issue of how to get this done in the face of overwhelming, money, as you mentioned, from big corporations and big unions and big funders. We're pursuing a different strategy in this situation. What we're doing is we're going to get this passed in the same manner the neighborhood legislature is going to operate. In other words, we're going to be doing this door-to-door, person-to-person. So what we've been working on for the past 6 months is that we're going to the leaders in the community. I'm not talking about politicians. I'm talking about the real leaders. I'm talking about the people who volunteer in the Rotary, Kiwanis, and other service clubs. We're talking to chambers of commerce and business groups like realtors and accountants and financial planners. We're talking to church groups of all denominations. We're talking to veterans. We're talking to college and university groups. We're basically going to the people who are already active in the community, and we're saying, join in this effort to talk to your neighbors about changing the structure of our politics so that it's more neighborhood-based and door-to-door. So we are recruiting people who ultimately will be serving on this neighborhood legislature, but they'll start now by going door-to-door. We're already over 6,000 people. I picked up 60 yesterday in a couple of visits just in Fresno. So we have about 15 field staff on the ground all the way throughout California, visiting with all of these groups and asking these groups for people to put themselves, out as volunteers on this effort. And I'm really, really pleased with the progress we've made. Our ultimate goal is to get 12,000, which is exactly the number of districts we're going to have after this is done. 12,000 people signed up to be leaders on this by the end of 2013, in another couple months. When we do that, we'll be able to, first of all, get the signatures to get this on the ballot. And secondly, we'll have an army of people across the state who will go door to door, explain this idea to their neighbors, and get their neighbors to vote for it. And I think that will win in the face of an onslaught in the media by people who are, chained to the current system.
We're having a conversation with John Cox from neighborhoodlegislature.com.
John, would these representatives that are elected in their districts be paid?
Yes. The neighborhood people, remember, they don't leave home. They're legislators in their neighborhood, but they never leave their home or office. They'll get just $1,000 a year. It's a tiny little stipend. It's basically a volunteer effort. The people who get sent, the one from each big district that gets sent to be part of the working committees in Sacramento, they'll get more of a full-time pay. They'll get $50,000 a year. And we set it at an amount that's less than what they're getting now, but enough so that somebody could really take the time away from their business or their family to spend a little bit of time in Sacramento. Remember, they won't have to raise money, and they won't have to campaign, so the time they spend in Sacramento will, by definition, be limited.
Isn't this just another way for the Republicans to get back in control?
No, I think it's a way for the public to actually have an effect on their process. Right now, the people who basically get things done are the people who write the checks for the campaigns. In this situation, real people in these real neighborhoods will be able to meet their representative, will actually be able to have their opinion heard by the representative, and that representative will in turn be someone who can weigh in on their opinions with respect to their working committee member and really have an impact on legislation. Right now, it's basically the people who write the checks. It's the union bosses, it's the big corporations, it's the big utilities. They're the ones that get their voice heard.
John, we've got about a minute left. Where can people get a hold of you and find out more about this?
They can go on the website, neighborhoodlegislature.com. They can go on Facebook and like us. They can follow us on Twitter at NHLEGIS, and they can first and foremost is to go on the website at neighborhoodlegislature.com and sign up to be a future legislature. These tiny little districts of only 5,000 people, that wouldn't take any time at all to walk that neighborhood and get to know your neighbors. And you can be a legislator by doing that and really have a part of what we're calling the greatest transfer of power since 1776, and I really believe that that's what this is all about.
I agree with you, John. The website, again, is www.neighborhoodlegislature.com. John, we're going to have you back soon. Thank you so much for the time.
I appreciate it, Marty and Clay. Thank you.
Take care now. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180.